Hello and welcome to Rock Enroll, the podcast on strategic marketing and enrollment management in higher education. We hope you enjoy it and don't forget to subscribe. This episode is part 2 of the 2-part series on the current state of higher education. If you haven't listened to the first episode, we recommend doing so and then joining us for the second part of the conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting you said about the personalized website approach, because I feel like we've heard a lot about that in the past few years. We've certainly seen it in the consumer marketing space. What does that actually look like for in the academic space? Like, when we say like a personalized website experience, what does that actually look like from the at least from the prospective student's point of view?
Yeah, well, I can speak to one project that I had worked on a few years back, and we had a particular group of students. I was at Bentley University at the time, and we were trying to get a particular group of students to yield and show up for classes. And so what we did was we created this personalized site, and depending on the information that we had about that prospective student, information around their interests, what classes they're interested in, the major, things of that nature, we were able to create custom sections that could speak to those interests and encourage them a little bit deeper into that decision process. These people had already been accepted. They had applied and had been accepted. We really needed them to make sure that they made the commitment to come in the fall. So using a personalized microsite that is catered towards their interest, sports affiliations, Greek life, what have you, any of those types of things on campus, that information can be leveraged and included in those types of personalized microsites. And there's some really interesting methods for doing that these days.
It's interesting about thinking about how websites can, and I guess nowadays really should be personalized, to individual people. I'm thinking about one of the most, I suppose, unpersonalized and yet hyper-personalized web experiences we have, which is Google, which, by the way, Google is no longer, as of this week, that was another kind of thing that popped up this week. Google is no longer the most visited website in the world. It's actually TikTok now, which is interesting, not surprising, and terrifying, perhaps all at the same time. But there we have it. But yeah, in terms of Google, we think about the data trends that I know you've spent a good part of your career kind of digging into. What's the data telling us these days? At least for higher ed.
Yeah, so some of the interesting things that I've been looking at recently, for example, if you dig into the Google Trends data, which, by the way, is a fantastic tool. If any of the listeners have not used Google Trends, I highly recommend it. It's a free tool anyone can use. And there's some very interesting insights that you can get out of it. One of which recently I was in there and I was looking at the general interest and general searches for colleges and universities as a category, the category of colleges, the category of universities. That means that they're grouping together all kinds of different terms that include the word college, colleges, all those variations. So we're looking at the broader category. So that includes a lot of different search terms within the kind of broader category of colleges and universities. And what we saw was there was a peak of interest, in 2004. And that was basically as far back as the data goes. And as recently as December of 2021, we can see that the interest has actually dropped to the level where it's only between 18 and 22% of the searches for college, universities that we saw in 2004, 18 to 22% as many searches. So that is a massive decrease in search interest for colleges at the moment. And the fact that has steadily gone down, I think is not only fascinating, it's something that should continue to ring some alarm bells.
So that's search data. That's organic search data across the entire United States for these very kind of specific related to exploring opportunities at colleges and universities. How does that connect? Is that sort of like a measure of interest overall? Is that considered to be kind of a measure of interest overall?
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, is being able to leverage some of the search data from Google It really is a view into directly into what people are thinking. There's very little filtering going on between what people are thinking and what they're typing into Google. They're just thinking of something, they're curious about it, they're searching for it. That interest over time, Google captures all of that data, and you can see, who's trending and kind of what's popular at the moment, whatever that might be. Some things tend to stay pretty popular, and some things tend to change over time. And despite the fact that we think of colleges and universities really as being an institution in America that just sort of will always be here, the reality is, we have to maintain an interest in it. We have to continue to support it over time. And, if we're only currently seeing about 18% of the interest that we saw in 2004, I mean, that's a drastic change. And that's even before the demographic cliff fully hits, which will be in just a couple of years. I don't know if do you want to speak a little bit about that and some of those expectations? Remind some of our listeners about what's happening with the demographic cliff.
Yeah. So, gosh, we are just rays of sunshine today, aren't we? We're gonna have to and find a more positive note to put this on. But yeah, no, the demographic cliff. I think a lot of folks in higher ed are familiar with this term. A lot of folks aren't. But yeah, so essentially, starting in 2025, there will be a considerably smaller number of 18-year-olds than there have been in previous years. And the number of 18-year-olds in America in any given year has been on a slow but steady decline, really, for a generation now. That's because, well, people have been having fewer kids for a long time. But if we roll the clock back from 2025, go back 18 years, that was 2007. That was when the financial crisis was starting to really unfold and really hit. And obviously during the Great Recession, birth rates plummeted. They've never really recovered since then. I did see a couple months ago that Target and Walmart reported an all-time increase in sales of pregnancy tests as well as pregnancy vitamins. So I guess if we can all just buckle down till 2043. There is hope on the horizon. But in the interim, the next 2 decades that we have in front of us, looking like there's just, again, that traditional student market is just smaller. And it's like we talked about at the start of the hour, that tools like Common App are seeing increases in applicants. That's great. But what they're getting is a broader percentage of a shrinking pie, that the overall pool is small and it's just going to get smaller, which is terrifying in some ways, but also just clarifying. It's what we see. It's the opportunities that we see. And, Josh, when you mentioned that about the Google search trend data kind of pointing to where the future is heading, my thoughts were going back to that Tears for Fears song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. That opening line, right? Like, welcome to your life. Like, this is it in many ways. We thought about this demographic cliff was going to hit us so hard in 2025. It was going to be this terrifying thing, and et cetera. Well, it just turns out we got it 3 years earlier than we thought. Perhaps it was because of the pandemic. Perhaps that was it. But, for enrollment marketers, really kind of that line from that song keeps hitting me of like, just welcome to your life. Here it is. This is what we're dealing with. But, when you know the size of it, when you know what you're up against, and when you can measure the challenges in front of you, that's when you can respond. And frankly, that's what we're all about. That's the fun challenge, right? Like it's about to become harder, but hey, bring it on. Let's do it.
It's important to know where to focus too. And I think that's a big part of it. You mentioned the financial crisis from 2007, 2008, kind of that time period. And, some time back, I had done an analysis of MBA interest specifically for MBA programs, which had a very sharp decline right after that. Basically around that same time, we saw a decrease in interest for MBA programs, kind of hoping that had recovered a little bit. And I think, an interesting note is that some institutions were even seeing just this past year some increases in applications and in inquiries for MBA programs. But I think back to the study that we ran back in the summer of 2021 that really indicated, yes, it might be better in some ways than it was in 2008, but really there's not a lot of reason to start rejoicing for the MBA programs in particular. In fact, they've been pretty steady, if anything. And so I think that's kind of caused us to question, where are the pockets of interest, what's growing, what's decreasing, and how has that interest shifted over time?
Back in the summer, when we were looking at the data from the spring of 2021, really felt like we were it was showing us where this year was going to unfold. And so looking at that national clearinghouse data, looking at some of these other factors, it didn't paint a great picture when we looked at this Google data back in the spring, but it did give us a sense of which majors could be of interest now moving forward to students, which is kind of exciting in its own right, I think. And I wonder, when we think about that 13% growth in applicants through the Common App, what are those folks planning to study? What majors are of interest to them? I think our COVID correction piece really probably gives us a pretty good window into what that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a few areas, just going back to some of that data, and that study can easily be downloaded on the Vision Point website. But looking at some of the program areas that had the most interest, or rather an increase in interest as a result of COVID, we saw actually some increased interest in gender studies and ethnic studies, for example. Those were two key areas. Finance was one. Interestingly enough, everything that's been going on with the economy, it makes sense where people would be interested in finance as well. There were a couple others. I would say doctor of osteopathic medicine, the helping careers, the helping professions, we're definitely seeing a bit of an increase. In fact, the professional degrees for public health, which you have a degree in public health.
I do, and I'll give you a strong pitch. Even if you don't end up working in public health, it is a masterful degree. You get so much information about human behavior, as well as how to educate large population groups, as well as how to read population level data. So I have to say, for a marketing career, invaluable. That's my plug. It's moving on.
Yeah, but there's definitely been an increase in interest, at least in search interest recently. A couple other areas here and there, but really it was only a handful that saw a significant increase in interest as a result of COVID. The vast majority of majors that we studied here, and we studied around 120 different major areas. Really, we saw a lot of decreases in interest. A few just kind of quick examples, electrical engineering saw a decrease of 33%, human science, a decrease in 30%, optometry about 30% as well. I mean, we're seeing quite a bit of decreases in interest, a few areas of increase, and then a few steady, but the vast majority have been decreases. I will say, despite that, I think that the new data from Common App in particular is encouraging. I for one, am really curious to see how the fall is going to shake out in 2022. If that increase in applicants and applications, really does translate into more students, that will be fantastic, and something that will hopefully start to send us back towards something that resembles normal.
We might get a little bit of a reprieve. We might get to breach the surface for a minute and draw our breath and feel like we're not drowning. But the demographic trends are going to just get worse, especially in that traditional undergrad side. So I think the challenge for higher ed, a lot of enrollment folks, a lot of strategists, a lot of college and university presidents are sitting thinking, well, if the traditional side is traditional undergrad segment is going to decline, then we have to reach adult learners. And they're absolutely right. The number of Americans out there who started a degree but haven't finished one is immense, to say nothing of folks who just want to go back and learn new skills or tools, retool in other areas. But it's so much easier said than done. And so I caution folks. I think in higher ed, sometimes we can have a bit of what I call silver bullet thinking of, we'll just do online programs. We'll get international students. We'll do this, and something's going to save enrollments or save a business model, bring in that new revenue. We're probably out of silver bullets now. And adult learners, I don't think, are the next silver bullet to pursue. They're just another market segment that has to be included in anybody's mix.
Has to be part of the overall mix. Yeah. I mean, that's where I think a lot of the schools that have been successful over the past couple of years, they saw that early. They've already been working on that, frankly, for years. I think, my former employer, SNHU, a lot of the other schools that have really focused on the adult student market. And there's, to your point, it's not a silver bullet. It's not, you can't just build it and they'll come. You have to target them with the right messaging and the right place and the right time, all of that. But it really is a new area of focus for a lot of people. And I think, what are some of the considerations that you think schools should keep in mind when they're thinking about, given all of this data that we've seen, some positive stuff going on, a lot of negative stuff going on, what decisions should I make out of this? How should I take this data and turn it into something that I can actually do, over the next month, at a particular institution?
I think that's a great frame because, so much in life, it's really not the doing that's hard, it's the decision, right? Like once you've made the decision, the doing actually becomes much easier. And really all strategy is figuring out what decisions you're making at the offset and what's going to guide your future decisions moving forward. And so for myself, I think really college presidents, enrollment folks, they need to have the right data in front of them to understand when it comes to making decisions about which audience segments to pursue and which factor subgroups within audience segments that we're going to pursue. What is the data telling us that makes that decision be a little bit more informed? And then for our marketing folks as well, when you're trying to think about what channels are we going after, what messaging should we be deploying, what data do you need in front of you to understand which one of those decisions to make with confidence? For us, we're firm believers that, especially when it comes to enrollment marketing, go a little bit deeper than those traditional marketing performance KPIs, things like, clicks and click-through rates and cost, even cost per acquisition, cost per lead, that sort of thing. Go a little bit deeper and really get that traction on your data to where you're able to understand what is your cost per enrolled student? Where is this rolling up to? When you have that fuller picture of which specific channels are leading to interest, but also application, and then finally enrollment interest from those targeted segments, these decisions actually get a lot easier to make. And it becomes easier to make adjustments, to your strategies and plans as you get through the year. So,
yeah. So if you don't have that infrastructure in place already, there's no time like the present.
Yeah, exactly.
Creating an infrastructure that allows you to track that. And once you have that in place, using that data to really guide some of your decisions, like you're saying, focusing on the right metrics. And I think, one of the things that is so important with some of this is that, not all of the old tactics are going to work in the same way anymore either. And so those key metrics, especially like you mentioned, cost per enrolled student, are going to be extremely helpful in understanding which tactics really are contributing to your main goal, which for most institutions that we talk to, it's going to be either more enrolled students or a little bit of shaping the class, a particular type of enrolled student, and kind of knowing where those risks are and kind of where the willingness to take some of those risks. So using that data to inform, we know that this is working. We're pretty confident in this. And we're going to reserve, let's say 80 to 90% of our budget for things that we know for sure will be working well. But we're also going to be willing to, take that 10 to 20% of our budget to, try something new, try something that we've never tried before, something a little riskier, and making sure that, there is a little bit of, risk tolerance, a little bit of a willingness to maybe make a gamble because, going into some of those new channels, like you said, TikTok, many people still consider that kind of a brand new platform in a lot of ways. When you just pointed out, it's now traffic wise, the most visited site in the world. And so if it's no longer Google and TikTok is so big and your institution isn't already in TikTok, advertising or at least doing something organically, those are some things to reassess and reconsider what tactics really do need to be the focus area.
Indeed. I think understanding, going back to that concept that there are no silver bullets in enrollment strategy or in program mix or anything like that, there are no silver bullets in marketing strategy either. That if you're going to take, this is definitely the time to take some risks. Like we said from the start, if all you ever done is all you ever do, just start investigating and take some risks. But at the same time, again, having the right data in front of you makes those decisions, makes those risks a lot more calculated, and also makes it easier to understand if your gamble in a certain channel is paying off, if that calculated risk is kind of giving you that return that you were looking for as well. But it really does kind of all come back to just having that handle on your data. So,
absolutely. Well, Dana, I've enjoyed our conversation today.
Same.
There's been a lot of great info that we've been able to talk through. For those who don't know me, I'm Josh Dodson. I'm the Vice President of Innovation at Vision Point Marketing.
And I'm Dana Cruikshank, Vice President of Market Strategy here at Vision Point Marketing. Vision Point Marketing is an enrollment marketing and enrollment analytics company. We've been around for about 20 years now, working in the higher ed space and only in higher education. We provide solutions to enrollment challenges at every step of the prospective student journey, from brand development and creative campaigns, digital and traditional marketing, strategy work, all the way through to web development, SEO, organic tactics, lead nurture, helping folks get the most out of their CRM, yield campaigns, you name it, all while having a particular focus on data sophistication at every step of the way to know constantly what is working, what's not working, and how to measure our return on investment. We pride ourselves in being able to provide an outstanding client experience that's really rooted in a relentless pursuit of results, in particular enrollment results. We know that enrollments are really, bottom line, the only really metric of success that matters, especially today.